One, could we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Whipple,
Present from Mason, Michigan.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Present from Mason, Michigan.
Councilmember Clark,
Present from Mason, Michigan.
Councilmember Josha,
Here from Mason, Michigan.
Councilmember Ferris,
Present, Mason, Michigan.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Here, Mason.
and Councilmember Vogel.
Here from Mason, Michigan.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. If you would all, wherever you are, rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and Invocation led by Council Member.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dear Lord, we give you thanks for the indomitable spirit of the community of Mason throughout this past year and continuing. We also give you thanks that things are starting to return to normal, as witnessed by the spring fling yesterday. We ask that you continue to help us to overcome obstacles and to serve as best we can in your world. Amen.
Thank you, Elaine. Next, we have public comment. I'm assuming Sally Trout, Deb Bloomquist are not public, but I guess, and John Ireland or John Sabadin, does anybody in that group wish to speak in the public comment portion?
No.
Okay. What about the others? John? I'm assuming Deb doesn't because she's with cattle.
Right.
I'd like to speak.
You would? Okay. Mr. Ireland, we'll let you go first. If you would give us your name and address, and we'll give you 3.
John 1/2 West Ash Street, here in Mason. I recently found out that there's a city ordinance against riding a skateboard in the public cemetery. I think that's a little unfair, being that bicycles and scooters and people walking their dog is it's fair to them, but I don't find that fair to people trying to exercise and ride a skateboard. I ride my skateboard to the grocery store and the pharmacy and to my doctor's appointment, and I feel it's a little unfair. And also, being that it's okay to ride it to the river trail, which is on the other side of the cemetery, but I'd have to pick up my skateboard and walk it to the other side of the cemetery to get to the river trail. So I guess that's really all I have to say. I'd like to be able to ride my skateboard in the cemetery.
Thank you, Mr. Ireland. I don't know if we'll, that might be something to consider. I guess wasn't really aware of that, but you would understand that although you're probably a very responsible skateboard person who is using the skateboarding for recreation in the cemetery.
Folks ride their bicycle and walk their dogs in the cemetery.
The difference is that they usually don't join in large groups and jump off hills and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just thinking about the realities of the situation, but it's something for us to probably look into since you brought it up.
Oh, all right. Well, it's just something that I've only recently found out. I've spoken with an officer who told me that it was a situation, and I've ridden there for some years, and I don't really much encounter other skateboarders, and I feel like I'd have known if it were such a thing.
Well, you don't encounter them because it's not allowed. I mean, that's that's the problem. So I think we'd have to study it.
I see people out there, but it's one person, two people. I don't see them up. I can understand why, like, you wouldn't want a whole bunch of people out there, but I mean, people could go out there a whole bunch on bicycles too.
Yep, I get it. All right, I just wanted to clarify that and run that by you. Okay, thank you. That's thanks for the comments.
All right, thank you.
John Sabaden, did you want to say anything?
I was here for the John Sabaden 45 here again. I was here just to be a spectator, but now that Mr. Ireland has brought that up, I think that's a good point that he's made. I'd like the council to maybe make a give relief to skateboarders and make there is a designated trail there, and allow skateboarders to take that designated trail to get from the one side of the cemetery to the other side, to continue that path through for the Riverwalk. So I'd support Mr. Ireland's concern.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no one else, it appears to be from the public. I do have one written submission that I will read and enter into the record here. This is from Sean Sodman, 105 South Park Street, Mason. It says, "Dear City Council members, I am writing this email in response to Councilwoman Vogel's nomination for the upcoming recognition ceremony. It is my understanding that her nomination is being held up out of concerns that this nomination is inappropriate. I'm confused as to why any nomination for individuals whose end goals are nothing more than to make our school and community a more inclusive place should be considered controversial. While I understand that Ms. Thomas resigned her position with the school, her history is not the subject of her nomination. Her actions now are about bringing Mason into an alignment with the direction the world is heading. It is not out of malice or retribution and should not be treated as such. Mason made national news with this story, and whether we like it or not, there's a certain stigma that we now have. Stifling this nomination will only exacerbate matters and prove that we are indeed out of step with progress. We will be sending the message that Voices of Equity goes against our views. Is that really what we want? In life, we often get what we focus on. If we choose to only look at the negative side of this, that's what we'll see. But why? Why not instead look at this as a golden opportunity for both the council and the school together to send a clear message that we want to move forward? We don't have to agree on every single aspect, but we cannot change what we don't acknowledge. It is for these reasons that I implore this council to affirm Ms. Vogel's nomination." And that will conclude our public comment. The next item on our agenda is a presentation, the Capital Area District Library's annual report with presenters Heather Galpel, I hope I pronounced that correct, Head Librarian, Cattle Mason Branch, Scott Dimstra, Executive Director of Cattle, and Sally Trout, Chairperson of the Cattle Board of Trustees. I don't know which one of you is going to be doing most of the speaking, but I'll lay it open to you. Have your time.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try to share my screen here in just a moment, but first I want to thank you all for taking the time to include the Cattle Mason Library on your agenda. I'm Heather Gopel. You were very close, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
The head librarian of the Mason branch. Scott Dimstra, of course, is here, our executive director. From our board of trustees, we have our chairperson, Sally Trout, and trustee Deborah Bloomquist joining us today. So let me see if I can go ahead and do two things here. First thing, I am going to post a link in the chat message to our annual report in its digital form, just so that everybody has access to that. And I'm going to share my screen for a very short presentation. And that is Star Trek. Hold on one second. Couple technical difficulties. Are you guys seeing my screensaver or the report?
Looks blank.
Okay. How about that?
There, we've got the report.
Okay, so this is just my presentation. The report is also at the link. That's a full, gorgeous digital report. So 2020 was a challenging year, and your library rose to that challenge with the help of our municipalities, our school districts, and community partners. And I'd like to share a few highlights. First, again, please review that full 2020 annual report just for a wonderful overview of our very eventful year. Mason figures prominently in several of our district-wide efforts. And my favorite part of the report are the member comments we included. You're going to see many Mason voices in the margins, as well as a pretty great photo of a couple of important guys on page 16. So, our most important goal this year was keeping services going through the pandemic times. We succeeded in great part due to the City of Mason's support of initiatives like our curbside service. Dedicated parking spots that you provided meant we could safely and easily get materials to our members. And we also added services as the year progressed, including doorside pickup, which is very popular. John Ireland, I hope you can visit us on your skateboard. Just don't go up the ramp with it. We also added computer use, which is key for many residents in our area who lack internet access. We leveraged our wireless coverage by adding curbside laptops for members to check out and use outside or in cars. In short, we tried to meet your needs and we got as creative as we possibly could. One thing that really helped with that were our partners, and that made 2020 possible. We started the year by supporting the Ingham County Animal Shelter's literacy project, Space Tales, by providing free books and staffing for Read to Shelter Pets events. LFA Farmers Market in downtown Mason hosted our mini seed library that spring after lockdown, and they provided over 300 packets of free seeds while we were getting ready to launch curbside. We were one of the only libraries in Michigan to offer a seed library during shutdown, and that's thanks to our business community working with us. We also worked with the city to install a story walk last fall, and outdoor activities couldn't be more important right now. So we were so excited to get this going at such a crucial time. Dart Bank also helped us purchase giveaway books for the summer reading challenge. And even though summer was difficult for everybody, we kept our summer reading numbers really high. And I'm proud to report that the Mason branch was in either first or second place in total registrants across all age categories for our entire 13 library district. Our goal is to repeat that success in 2021. One of Mason's strengths is our commitment to our kids and our teamwork with our educators. Our youth librarian, Lindsay Anderson, pivoted to virtual story times and helped make them available in as many formats as possible, including taping story times for local TV stations and doing virtual visits in classrooms at elementaries all across the district. Miss Lindsay became a touchstone for many kids and parents last year, and we'd really like to thank Mason Schools for welcoming us into their classrooms. This is kind of just a visual of some high points. During lockdown and beyond, our digital collection, it didn't really translate well into PDF, but in any event, those are months. Our digital collection reached new heights. We had an overall 21% increase in circulation. So everybody checked out stuff to read on their tablets, and we love that. Our book club, which meets monthly, embraced the virtual format with the help of our assistant Cheryl May, and they continue to meet monthly. I'm really proud of how well everybody pivoted to new ways of meeting and staying in touch throughout this pandemic. We provided hundreds of take and make craft kits, grab and go bags of materials. Staff really worked hard to keep creativity and fun at the forefront. And finally, Cattle ended 2020 with the highest membership numbers in our over 20-year history. That's amazing to me. Finally, I want to thank the community for all the words of encouragement we received the past year. We received cards, letters, phone calls, people shouting at us through the windows. It's true. You all kept our spirits up and you reminded us every single day that what we do matters to the community. So finally, I want to thank the City of Kent Mason council members, the residents, and everyone for supporting your library. We couldn't have done it without you. And before I close, I want to add one last kudo to Chief Carrie Minshall and Pat Hicks for coming over constantly, unsticking windows, fixing collapsed ceilings, getting my heat back on, mitigating flooding, plugging up bees nests. Those two gentlemen really saved the day many, many times in 2020 and all years past. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
So, I'm gonna stop sharing here. Hopefully.
Are there any questions for Ms. Gopel from the council? All righty. Well, thank you, cattle representatives, for being here today. We appreciate the report and the really good news on your operations, especially in Mason. Sounds great. All right, moving right along. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Are there any items on the consent calendar that a council member would like to remove? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember DeRosa.
I move the approval of the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Been moved by DeRosa, second by Clark, to approve the consent calendar as presented. Could we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Drosha,
Yes,
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes,
Councilmember Schaefer,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Mayor Whipple.
Yes. The consent calendar is approved 7-0. Next on our agenda is a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 2020-2021 proposed budget. We will open the public hearing and then ask anyone who wishes to speak we'll open their mic and we'll need to get their name and address, and we'll give everyone 3 minutes to address the council regarding the budget. So we'll declare the public hearing open at 7:48. I guess it's down to Mr. Ireland or Mr. Sabaden. Do either of you wish to speak in the public hearing regarding the budget?
Nothing from me. This is John Sabaden.
Thank you. Mr. Ireland? All right, maybe he's gone away.
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, seeing there is no public comment regarding in the public hearing regarding the budget, we will declare the public hearing closed at 7:49. The next our order of business is resolution 2021-10, which is adoption of the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. Would anyone like to make a motion for this resolution?
Mr. Mayor,
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
I move the adoption of City Council Resolution 2021-10.
second,
Been moved by Brown, seconded by DeRosa to approve resolution 2021-10, which is adoption of the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Clark. I'm sorry, Councilmember Clark.
thank you. In the supplemental information that we were provided, I would like to hear from the administrator about the Maple Street Bridge repair, because even though the council voted to move that up, the administration says they're not going to do that, but there's a temporary fix or a quick fix or something. I'd like to hear what that is before I vote on this. That's one issue.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, after that meeting when we discussed how it was referenced in the capital improvement program, Michael Olson went out and reviewed the site, and the biggest issue was the actual railing, which we believe we can correct from that initial safety issue. The bridge is still deteriorating, and that needs to be in our capital improvement plan, but we think we can address the actual railing issue right now and address that safety issue. What's important to us is that we coordinate that bridge with the other work that's happening around that same time so that it's all coordinated together and we're not doing the bridge while Ash is under construction and having two issues of the roads being blocked and also understanding when the park is going to be coordinated. So the reason I didn't put it in the budget, just as a reference point, you are not approving the second year budget. You're only approving the first year budget. But I wanted to make sure council understood why we made that change, because our capital projects for next construction season, we actually start planning for in the fall. And so if there's a desire for that to maintain where it is in the CIP, we should have a conversation about that at a future council meeting so that we're planning appropriately. Otherwise, we were going to recommend that in the next CIP, we push it back to the year it was originally proposed because that was in coordination with other projects. Oh, and I just got a note that the rail has actually already been repaired. So they went out and saw that and fixed the issue where it was loose.
When did they do that? I was just by there like yesterday and there hasn't been any change that I could see.
I'm gonna defer to our assistant city manager who was just texting me so he can explain what the work was done. Mike, do you mind unmuting?
Yeah, sure. Councilmember Clark. The one I want to say, so on the south side of the bridge and the easternmost part of the rail, it started to separate. We put a post inside of the old post right now and secured it that way. That was the only part of the rail that was loose and we felt was a very big concern. Matter of fact, when Kirk and I were out there, this was relatively soon after it was mentioned in the last council meeting. We were just shaking it a little bit and it separated, and then the guy came back out and repaired it. I want to say not even a week later or later that week.
I appreciate that, Mike. Can you tell me what your feeling is about if anybody would happen to hit that railing with any kind of force at all? Where are they going to end up? In the bottom of the creek?
That rail is solid. I mean, I got some weight behind me and I was pushing on it pretty good and it wasn't moving. So they would really have to be attempting to destroy that rail. And I was giving it some good pushes and it wasn't moving.
Thank you.
Did you have other questions, Councilmember Clark?
Yeah, I was curious when the other thing that was mentioned was the police vehicle. And I was wondering if, according to the paperwork, that is a, where I entered it, a Ford Police Interceptor utility. Was any consideration given to the hybrid?
I can provide information on the hybrid. It is a more expensive vehicle.
I have information on the hybrid. That
Well,
part of the issue with our police vehicles has been the having to idle them in extremely hot weather to keep the air conditioning going, idle them in the winter to keep the heaters going. The hybrids will do that off from batteries and only energize the engines when the batteries are low. They have an MPG that's 40% better than what you're talking about, and their average savings about $3,500 per year. So I don't know what the difference in price is.
I would be happy to do to review that and provide the same analysis as we did as the other vehicles, if you would like more information, but that's not something that I think would restrict the budget discussion tonight.
Well, but I also looked at the Dodge Chargers, which I had a couple of questions about so far as your analysis, because the overall specs are not that much different so far as cabin space and clearances and those kinds of things. I'm a little confused when you say that the requirements for keeping different parts, because one is a Dodge, and we deal with Fords. But to the best of my knowledge, we don't have an ASC certified mechanic on, so about the most they're going to do is an oil change, and that's a filter and some oil, unless you can provide something else that they do that's more technically involved, requiring parts for those. I saw one of the Fords more recently parked over at Parsons Service for a week, apparently being repaired. So I guess I'm curious about that as well.
Well, I want to be clear that, right now, parts are difficult to find for any vehicle, especially Dodges. In fact, we actually heard from communities who have Chargers as their fleet and are not able to get Chargers this year at all. So they're actually shifting to Fords because they're able to get them right now. But parts themselves have been a challenge for them even previous to this, of getting regular parts and the amount of time it takes for even when you take it to a repair shop for them to get parts. That has been a constant challenge that we've been hearing even from other communities. But right now during COVID, you can't even get the vehicles.
Thank you.
And so I think those are part of the evaluation. But I mean, if you want an analysis of what we can do in-house and out, I can provide that as well.
I'd be curious about that and the difference in the hybrid price, because like I said, if we can save $3,500 a year per vehicle, I don't know if that's enough to offset the difference in the price, because I don't have access to the state bid.
I could probably get that by the end of before the end of the meeting. I just don't have it right here on my fingertips.
It would certainly be something worth looking at for future years. If it does provide a cost savings and reduce carbon footprint and all of that stuff. Anything else, Councilmember Clark? Are there any other questions or any other discussion on resolution 2021-22?
Mr. Mayor,
Or excuse me, 2021-10. I'm sorry. That was Councilmember Vogel, I believe. Yes, go ahead.
yes. Well, first, thank you, City Manager Stewart, for the supplemental information and meeting with me for hours after the meeting. So it's nice to see all of the comments in here. With Slotkin's community project grant and wastewater treatment. So if we're talking about a 40% increase over the time, and we won't know if we get that grant in December, would it make sense to do a water rate increase for residents over at least 2, maybe 3 different times, so that spreads out the 40%, so that if we end up getting the grant from Slotkin and federal money, that would offset and we could cancel the last 1 or 2 increases, because that's about half. That was like $8 million to the 17 million needed. So that we aren't burdening with one huge jump, or even the small one at 8. I'm wondering if the first one should be somewhere like between 12 or 15 in the next 12 months or 18 months. So I just kind of, what are the thoughts on that potential?
I think from our perspective, from a staff's perspective, the recommendation we made, we still stand by, which is that smaller percentage the first time. That will cover, generally this will cover our capital and keep us operational no matter what we do next steps, evaluating the rate study. After we've had some more history with after COVID impact of water usage. And then at that time, we should have a better idea of any federal funds that we may have access to. So that will drive some of that rate study discussion. Some of the other opportunities we may have, like through the county, they're talking about a low interest loan or things like that. So that would still require a financing structure that would include a rate increase. We are excited to be one of the top 10 projects that they're pushing for an appropriation, but that's still a pretty competitive process, and we want to, although their office has indicated that we have a very competitive project, we should have a good understanding of that by November of where we are as far as the likelihood of that being included. So I think we'll have more information this fall and winter, and then you can make a decision based on that. And I think the rate increase we have right now allows us to get through this time period with enough revenue that would be standard revenue we would need whether we were doing the wastewater treatment plant or not.
Principal, power will be turned off. So the 8% now, the leftover 32%, we really won't be discussing till next budget year. And hopefully receiving that grant will offset that need, because we won't need as much from the public if we get that federal grant money.
Just to be clear, the council can raise rates at any time. We're not talking about a tax rate increase, which we'd have to do within a certain time to hit when taxes are collected for that year. But a rate increase can be done at any time. So as we have more information, if we know in November or December that we are not going to get federal funds, that would be enough information for you to make a decision on whether a rate increase would happen that January or February, depending on what makes sense.
It's a lot. I just want to keep in mind, even with the other great idea, the workshop for the proposed for parks and capital funding. So, it all adds up. Thank you. Oh, and how many police cars do we have?
So we have, if you look at that breakdown, it
4.
depends on what you define as a police vehicle. Because we have 4 that are used by our patrol sergeants and officers. And then we have 2 that are administrative vehicles. 1 is not enforcement rated. The other one is enforcement rated. And that can be a backup for those other 4.
That's the chief and code enforcement?
No, it's the chief and our detective. So the detective has a non-law enforcement rated police vehicle.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on resolution 2021-10?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Schaefer.
just have a couple of questions of the city manager. Have we received the federal money? And do we know what that total is going to be, that 800 and some odd thousand that they said they were sending over?
Our allocation goes through the state, so I have not had an indication of the exact timeline of that, but it should be soon. And our estimate we think is pretty accurate. We haven't gotten the official at this point.
So it's spread over 2 years, am I correct?
Yes, half we get in the first payment and half in the next payment.
So it'd be roughly,
And not another year, yeah,
roughly 400 and some odd thousand a year.
correct.
And that is slated, I understand, to go towards water fund projects.
Well, actually, the first amount is likely going to be almost all provided related to lost revenue. So that would be revenue that we didn't get, that we were anticipating because of the shutdown. So it would be
where does that
making
money
up.
go? I mean, where in the budget does that money go? I mean,
Well,
X amount-
depending on the lost revenue, it depends on where it goes. So for example, a big chunk of that is water usage being down. So that would go into the water sewer fund. We did have some things in our police department that was lost revenue that would go into our general fund. So it would go into those areas depending on what the revenue loss was related to.
So a big chunk, let's say, can I say 75% of it? Would that be out of line?
Let me look at the highlights real quick. So we have in lost revenue, approximately 460,000 in lost revenue that we were expecting that was reduced because of COVID. So that first payment is going to be almost all, well, will be all dedicated to that.
So how much of that goes to the water fund? Water, lost revenue from the water fund?
It looks like around 375,000.
375,000. So that's approximately, if I do my math correct, that's approximately that would be equal to about a 12% raise in water based on $31,000 per 1% increase in water rates.
Well, it would be our ability to not have to raise it to cover those costs. So this is to make it even so that we wouldn't have to do additional rate increases to cover that lost revenue. And I want to be clear, was our lost revenue to date of the budget. There may be higher lost revenue in the next couple of months that would all be eligible as well.
So it was, I guess, maybe I missed the meeting. I don't know, but what is the 8% that you're currently asking for? I mean, what is
the 8% is to cover our general capital outside of the large capital projects we're proposing. So this is meant to be our operational costs that we have not been keeping up with.
So
the 8% will cover that.
So we voted in an 11% operational increase last year. And it's going to be 8% this year, plus $375,000 from the federal government. Plus, we're going to go for somewhere between a 30 and 40% or 50% raise first of the year.
I want to be clear that the money that we're getting from the federal government, that is making it so that we don't have to increase rates more. Because the projections we had were based on normal usage of water, which we did not experience this last year because of businesses being shut down. This money is to supplement that so that we can still keep the rate process that we had without having to increase. That was a specific target of this money.
But what is driving the cost that required 11% last year, 8% this year?
A lot of various things, increased regulations, lead and copper, different treatments we now have to do, different reporting we have to do, that all drives more labor hours, more working on all those things are driving that. Infrastructure in our roads, we're now hitting projects where these are large infrastructure projects. Those operating costs are happening. When you talk about what we're projecting in the cost to identify and replace throughout, the whole city, that's a few years ago.
So in the last year, we've, based on $31,000 per 1% of increase, we have spent or will have spent.
I want to remind you that when we were doing the rate increase discussion, the water rate increase, our operations were already trending where we were hitting fund balance. We were not breaking even.
Well,
Even in previous years.
I can't understand why costs of water have gone up $589,000 roughly in 1 year. I have a hard time believing that.
Can you walk me through how you got to that number?
Well, you say 1% increase in water is approximately $31,000. And if it's 11% last year, plus 8% this year, actually it's to be a little bit more because it's compounding. But if you just take a straight 11% last year and 8% this year, times $31,000, that's about $589,000 if I'm not incorrect.
If you're looking at our capital improvement program, you're going to see that trend of things like we had a water tower, big infrastructure. We have another big, a lot of deferred maintenance in our water and sewer system that we are having to do replacements on. Our water treatment plant is starting to have some major replacements. These are all things that we're starting to hit. And so the capital improvement program did a great job of really starting our asset management for the next 6 years. And we can see the trend of replacement that we have to do to meet our permits. And so that is what's driving those costs. And a lot of those things are hitting at the same time. When you look at our underground infrastructure coming up in our streets, that's not going to stop. We are going to be doing that on a regular basis in our streets. We're starting to get to the underground, stage of life where those pipes are failing more. I know you brought up a great example of South Street. The main reason South Street is deteriorating so quickly, even though it's not in our 6-year plan, is because the infrastructure underneath is deteriorating. And so that is what's driving some of these costs and projects dollars to increase.
I have a hard time believing the cost is going up that fast. And you talk about lost revenue due to reduced water usage. But on one aspect, that is true. But on the other aspect, if we're using less water, we're treating less water, which reduces cost somewhat. And I understand the fixed cost is still there, but it still reduces cost somewhat. It has to.
It doesn't. We still have to operate the plant. We still have talk about ready to serve is a real thing to consider, because there is a cost to do just the ability to have it available to people. So the fact that they're using significantly less doesn't change that. We still have to operate the pumps. We still have to regularly do those things. I mean, when we talk about our operating costs, I mean, operating costs for everything are going up. When we talk about healthcare costs, when we talk about any of those things, that is all going up. Even the basic training signaling. These are all were triggered in the Lead and Copper Act and some of the legislation following that. Those are all things that we shifted very quickly to address, and we needed to catch up with from an operating perspective. I know when you say, 31,000 percentage, that goes very quickly in a water and sewer fund. When you look at the capital projects we have planned in a year, it goes very quickly. And this is the good news is the capital improvement plan shows the plan and what's coming. Our hope is that we can maybe from a timing perspective get access to some of these federal dollars so that we don't have to do as large of a rate increase. But that doesn't impact the fact that this 8% is needed for us to just operate.
Well, perhaps it is, but I have a hard time believing that costs are going up at this rate. So even after just for a quick, if someone's had to spend $100 on water in January of 2020, with the 11%, the 8%, and the proposed 40% as in those letters, they're going to be paying $168 for the same amount of water in less than 2 years. And while perhaps that is justified, is there any worry that sooner or later the bank's going to run dry? People are not going to be able to pay this. Then what are we going to do? We're going to shut them off. And then what? And then that reduces the influx of revenues. I mean, there has to be a point somewhere where this has got to stop.
Well, I can share that in talking with other communities, they're all experiencing similar rate increases, and they're not doing a wastewater treatment plant or a water treatment plant or any of those things. They're experiencing these kind of rate increases because of the requirements and the aging infrastructure that every city in the US or in Michigan is kind of hitting around the same time. We put in infrastructure around the same time and it's all deteriorating. And now they're under these big dollar amounts you can't just repair the road, you have to repair what's under it. So these are things that are the reality of providing water. And it's not just us. I mean, I know that we've had other cities around us that have had significant rate increases. That's why we tried to provide you a comparable. While every system is different, they're all facing similar issues, which is increased regulation, increased cost to even provide the services because our operators have to be at a higher level than they were previously. And we also have regular maintenance. I mean, they're part of the new law requires you to have an asset management plan and fund that asset management plan because they don't want to see the same things happening in Flint where you maybe identified the issue, but you didn't fund it. And so those are all things that we are now under a responsibility to do. Now there is state and federal money coming out right now that we are applying for like crazy. And our hope is that we can reduce that increase, but there's no guarantee of that. And this is work we need to do no matter what.
So basically what you're saying is even if we raise it 8% this year and build a new water plant next year, the costs will continue to go up. Are they going to go up at the same rate they're going up now? Operating costs?
I honestly can't.
I'm wondering that, like, what are projected next year? What are, without the grant money, what are you thinking our next year increase for water rates is going to be?
Well, the water rate study will project out assets for a significant amount of time. And it will also project out bond payments and things like that. So that will give us the information so that you can see the long-term projection. There will be a built-in operating increase that is standard for operating costs. I mean, when you talk about, we don't control some of these cost increase that we're experiencing. We don't control our healthcare cost increase. We don't control in those things. We have, it all triggers by different elements. And so those are things that we have to be able to adapt to, but we will definitely have estimates in those projections so that we can provide it. Our goal is to get to a stable rate, but I want to be clear, that rate study will likely require normal increases, annual normal increases, because costs increase. And providing the service does, it's not going to be we increase it, we're done for 10 years. You need to be regularly keeping up with the cost to do business.
Okay, thank you. Just one other question, quick question. We're buying a vehicle for the code enforcement officer?
Where are you at in the budget?
Well, I don't know. Let me dig. I don't know exactly where it is, but I happen to notice that. You happen to know what type of budget or vehicle that's going to be?
I don't know where you're at because we don't have a vehicle just for code enforcement.
Okay, I'll look it up and get back to you later tonight.
Our current code enforcement vehicle is shared amongst multiple entities, so she just uses that as needed.
Okay, I'll find that. Thank you.
I guess, I don't know if this helps. I certainly hope it doesn't hurt. But I guess I would just ask people to look at the budget itself. The requested budget shows a $2.3 million increase in revenue from last year to this year, as well as a $2 million increase in expenses. And that we're still taking $883,000 from fund balance for the water and sewer fund. So I guess if I see a number of things increasing. A big chunk of this is $2 million for capital outlay, which is, I'm assuming, related to the wastewater treatment plant expansion project. But there are also some pretty substantial changes in here for fringe benefits and salaries, which, as I recall, we had a study done or something done from our auditors, which required us to reallocate some of that money that did impact several of our funds. It increased the cost of fringe benefits for the water and sewer administration, for instance, by a factor of 7. So the bottom line is if you look at the supplement that the city manager has provided, and I'm sliding through the old proposal here. If you look at the supplement, I mean, it tells you right there, the revenue from water and sewer sales is 3.4 million, but the total revenue is 5.5. The total expenditures is 5.5. So if I guess if a council member can point to something that we can reduce in expenditures, then obviously that'll change that, but the numbers are right there. We're only looking at a net $66,000 in a $5 million operation that we budget that we will be to the black. So that's with the 8% proposed increase. I don't claim to know the details of the ins and outs of day-to-day operations, but just looking at these numbers in the budget, I think it bears out that we're not asking for more than is needed unless it can be found where there's something we're spending money on that we don't need. But I don't know if that helps or not. I appreciate Councilmember Schaefer's questions because they're all good. It is a big change, but this is a kind of unprecedented territory for the city in many, many years since we did the water treatment plant. We haven't done a very large capital project in the wastewater and water systems that we're beginning to embark upon in this next budget year. And I think that's going to make the numbers inflate a little bit. And I think we need to be careful about talking about the 40% or 50% or whatever. That was what was proposed in the preliminary rate study that we got, well over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It was pre-COVID, I know that, because we met in person. That's one thing I know. That study was based on that at numbers at that time. We're pretty certain, I believe, that usage is going to go down. That the usage when we come out of COVID will be lower than it was in February of last year. Just because there's going to be more people working from home, there's going to be different things. Now it could be different. Maybe we get a windfall, in which case the increases might be less, or there might even be decreases. I hate to predict that because I don't know that it's going to happen. And then if we can get the $8 million that we've requested from the feds, that'll dramatically impact any rate increases that we've got to consider. But we can't count on that because it's not been approved yet. That's just my comments on this. I agree with Councilmember Schaefer that, you know, these are big increases that we've never seen before over multiple years, but we've never been in this environment before. And the fact of the matter is, over the next is going to be a $7 million project. Folks, that's bigger than our water and sewer fund. So, you know, that's an unfunded mandate that we can't decide not to do, but that's what it's estimated to cost over 20 years. So yeah, you can divide that by 20 and get what, 350,000 a year, but that's still a pretty sizable chunk of the water and sewer operation.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Vogel.
should we ask your Fox News interview to correct? Because they have you in there at 40%. And that was the article from just a few days back.
Well, that was based on the, again, preliminary water rate study, water and sewer rate study that we had. It's the only data we have available. When we have new data available, which I know we're going to do a more thorough water and sewer rate study that will reflect actual costs. My biggest fear in this entire project is that this, I don't know, $15 to $17 million total estimate that we have on this project is going to be too low. I don't know if you guys have paid attention much, but you know, the cost of everything, gas is up double what it was a year ago. Lumber is up 40 to 50%.
Yeah, construction's
Everything's
up.
going to get more expensive. So we don't know yet the numbers. And so making increases now is obviously going to have an impact on increases in the future. But the 40% was kind of the middle of the road ballpark maximum total number that we were looking at in that preliminary rate study that said we might have to increase to. I hope against hope that that is the high end, that we don't have to go there, that it's not above that. And I'm thinking by doing things like increasing 11% last year and 8% this year and trying to stay as close to the black as we can. And, you know, the net revenue and appropriations number is 66,000 to the black, but the actual budget number is 880,000 to the red. But that includes some accounting things like depreciation and all that stuff. But the auditors look at both. So we need to be aware of both. So we're drawing from our fund balance this year as it is shown in the accounting, in the audits, even though we're budgeting that we'll bring in $66,000 more because of the way the requirements for our accounting are structured. Are there any other, is there any other discussion on resolution 2021-10?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Clark.
I'd just like to point out that these increases that you're talking about are surprising to me from the standpoint that when we built that water treatment plant, there was an extensive rate study done, and those increases were amortized out over 10 or 15 years or something like that. And all of that has not held up to be true, apparently, because now we're back to 11 and 8% increases. And at the time that we built the water treatment plant, we were telling everybody the same thing. You can expect 40 to 50% increases in your water bills. So here we are all these years later with a new plant, and we're in the same position. So I don't put a whole lot of credence in the rate studies. And for that matter, if we don't get any better results out of them than what we have right now, we might as well save our money and just do this willy-nilly like we have apparently.
Well, I agree with you that, you know, but the water plant is, what, 15, 18 years old now? So we've long since passed any time horizon that would have been evaluated in any rate study at that time. And at that time, there was no talk about replacing all the lead and galvanized lines in the city. And also, we didn't see a rampant inflation in the cost of things that we're seeing now. But I don't disagree with you. Believe me, I'm like anybody else. I pay several water bills myself. I'm not fired up about this, but the bottom line is, again, just looking at the budget, this current budget year, the current one we're in, that's going to end in July or end the 1st of July or end of June. We're looking at a net loss in the water fund of $265,000 on a cash basis and 1.1 million in a fund balance basis. So this budget's actually showing us in the black, which is something we haven't been at least this current year. So we're trying to get on top of this, I believe. And I think the city manager made clear that this is a moving target of sorts, because we don't know what our water usage is going to be because of the COVID impact, and we don't know what the lingering impact of that's going to be. So I agree with you. I offer, this is not to be sarcastic in any way, but if there's something a council member knows and can look at the budget and say, hey, we need to cut this, and we can make an argument and get the city manager to give us an analysis of it, I'd be all for it. But I'm looking at through this and I don't see really big changes anywhere except in some fringe benefits and wages, which I know are related to the auditors telling us how we're supposed to account for things. And then the capital work that we have to do for the wastewater plant. So I'm, you know, it's right there in black and white in the budget.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to note that rate studies are generally only good for 5 to 6 years. If you look at the change in even just healthcare costs or different regulations that we've experienced in that short period of time, there are significant impacts to our rates based on that. So they recommend that you redo those every 5 to 6 years.
Any other discussion on resolution 2021-10? It sure would be cool if it was resolution 2021-22. That would be perfect, but all right, can we have the roll call vote, please, on resolution 2021-10?
Councilmember Clark,
No.
Councilmember Josha,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Councilmember Schaefer,
No.
Councilmember Vogel,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Mayor Whipple.
Yes. Resolution 2021-10 is approved 5-2. All right. We have no unfinished business. So the first order of business under new business is a motion to go back to face-to-face council meetings, which was requested by Councilmember Schaefer. So Councilmember Schaefer, the floor is yours to make that motion.
I'd like to move that we go back to face-to-face meetings effective the next regularly scheduled council meeting. Thank you.
Second.
Been moved by Schaefer and seconded by Vogel to go back to face-to-face meetings at our next regularly scheduled council meeting. Is there any discussion? Mr. Schaefer, I guess since you made the motion, you get to go first.
I just feel it's time to go back to face-to-face meetings. We've been at this now for what, 15 months? The rates are dropping, the vaccinations are increasing, and I think we can do it safely, and I think that's what the public needs, and that's what the public wants, and that's what we deserve to give to the public is face-to-face meeting instead of sitting in front of a computer staring at each other about the size of a postage stamp. Thank you.
It's just, yeah, you're right. It is about the size of a postage stamp. I just want to point out that you know my position on this, and it's been very consistent, but I've been made aware that just last week, the CDC has changed their guidance and has issued that their guidance is that if you have a room full of people who are all vaccinated, there's no requirement for mask or distancing. So therefore, I can be in support of doing this because you know that my position's always been I did not want to appear at a meeting as a government official before people with a mask on. So I'm all for doing this, considering that that is the CDC guidance, and I don't see any expectation that in the next 2 weeks that it's going to change dramatically. So I just wanted to voice that and also note that probably then, since I believe, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so feel free to keep your mouth shut if you don't want to talk about it. I believe all council members are vaccinated or will be by the next meeting officially, which means 2 weeks past your second dose. And if that's the case, we would be in a position where we could meet in an actual normal meeting without masks. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Ferris, you had your hand up.
Yes, I was going to say that we are still under emergency order for the county until May 24th. So I'm fine with meeting on the 1st of June, but we're still under the emergency order.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that the emergency order requires us to comply with CDC regulations.
I was just gonna comment that seeing the school district wear masks, I was gonna echo your original thoughts on that, Mr. Mayor, because I couldn't hear anyone understand them, even the public for public comment. So this is new information. If we don't need a mask, then I would totally agree with Councilmember Schaefer's motion. And I miss all of you. This is hard.
Councilmember Ferris?
I am under some immune problems and I cannot meet in public at this point. Not without a mask. If everybody is wearing a mask, I can do it. Without it, no.
Well, because we are still under a emergency order, it makes this very interesting. We can allow you to participate remotely. I'm still not sure how we make that happen. The city manager tells me she has lots of good ideas about how to make that happen. I'm not sure she even knows if they'll work because we've never tried it, but you would be allowed to participate remotely because we're under the emergency order. Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would just like some clarity maybe from the city manager in terms of what she's seeing, because I was unaware of the CDC guidance that you referenced, Mr. Mayor. I was aware of the outdoor gatherings guidance, and I believe that still required vaccinated individuals to wear masks if distancing was not possible. So I'm just curious, given new CDC guidance. Also, I know there's current MIOSHA guidance that applies to workplaces out there because we're still adhering to that at the state level. And I'm also aware that the governor has just issued new metrics about returning to work after or returning to in-person work situations after we've reached a certain percentage of individuals receiving the vaccine. So I guess the reason I bring this all up is that the landscape is shifting, and I'm sure the city manager has done a little bit more research, at least than I have. So I'd like to hear a little bit more, explanation as to what conflicts with what and what supports what at this point.
Before I let the city manager ask that, I just want to clarify. The information I gave you came from the city manager. And the MIOSHA requirements state that we have to comply with the latest CDC guidance. There are some other MIOSHA requirements that actually conflict with that. However, there's always the caveat that if employees aren't vaccinated, we wouldn't require them to be there. And if they chose to wear masks, they could do so. If they chose to be distanced, we could make accommodations for that. If council members chose that they wanted to wear masks or wanted to be distanced, we can make accommodations for that. All of that can be managed, but the guidance is what it is. So city manager, go ahead and hopefully confirm and not hamstring me with what you're about to say.
I completely disagree with everything the mayor said.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
great.
No, I'm just kidding. So the CDC changed their guidance on April 27th, so last week. And what they provided some guidance of less safe, more safe, all of those kinds of ranges that you maybe saw the graphics for, the infographics. But the interesting part of the guidance that we were discussing today was fully vaccinated individuals can meet with other fully vaccinated individuals without wearing a mask or physical distancing. However, it does say that fully vaccinated people should take precautions when you have people that are maybe immune compromised, as Councilmember Ferris recommended, further distance, wear masks, different things like that. There's some accommodations to make that a little bit safer. It does say that you should avoid large in-person gatherings. And so we are not considered a large in-person gathering. The state threshold is 25, but the CDC guidance is much larger than that. But I would lean on the state guidance, which is 25. And so from that perspective, I think the city can make an argument that we could meet in person if we had confirmation that all council members were vaccinated. We could meet in person without masks for those that want to not wear a mask. Obviously, anyone who wanted to wear a mask could still wear a mask. And we could provide some accommodations with further distancing for those that maybe want a little more comfort than the close seating. Now, keep in mind, my OSHA requirements still apply to city employees. So the city employees present will be wearing masks, will be a distance away, even though we are likely will be fully vaccinated by that time frame. So what we would ask is that council members wear a mask until they're seated, but once they're seated, they can remove their mask if they're comfortable, and then they can speak in that. We would also place public 12 feet away because we're not going to be confirming whether they're vaccinated or not, so they would be the appropriate distance. And as I mentioned, staff would still fall under the other MyOSHA requirements.
Does that answer your questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, it does. It's interesting.
No, it's a long time overdue. Which I guess makes it interesting. Is there any other discussion on the motion to return to in-person meetings at the next regular meeting? All right, can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Joshua.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris.
No.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogel.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
No.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Mayor Whipple.
Yes. The motion is approved 5-2.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
Good
ma'am.
job, Jerry.
Yes, City Manager.
I would just request that in the next couple of days, if council members could provide to me, just in an email, I don't need to see any proof or anything, whether you've been vaccinated or not. And also whether you would like any additional accommodations, and we'll try to work through that, including if you're requesting that you're participating remotely because of one of the triggers in our rules. So the sooner that we can know that, the better we can plan for the layout of the room.
And keep in mind that fully vaccinated is second, and on the 2-shot vaccines is second shot plus 2 weeks. That's the rules that everyone seems to be following. I would imagine that if it's a day or two short of that, you'd still be okay, but that's what we mean by fully vaccinated.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Clark.
not that it matters to me, but I'm curious just for conversation's sake. Doesn't that violate HIPAA laws?
It does not. It's been documented and tested that asking whether people are vaccinated or not is something that requires changes in protocols. And if someone chooses to not share that information, the assumption is they have not been vaccinated, and we have to operate in that way.
Where has that been tested?
I can provide you information, but it's a clear exception to the HIPAA law.
Okay, I'd be curious to see that. Thanks.
I know my kids had to tell the school when they were vaccinated, so I don't understand what the big deal is. So item B in our agenda is now moot since we just dealt with it. One thing I did want to note is that based on how council members respond regarding the request for accommodations and distancing and whatnot, that may rearrange the seating arrangements on the horseshoe. So I just want to forewarn you that if you're someone who's asking to have distance, then you're gonna, if you're sitting in the inside of the shoe now, you're gonna be sitting on the outside in the meeting at next Monday. All right. Next item on the agenda is a discussion on the recommended withdrawal of nominations for the joint recognition ceremony with the school. This was requested by Councilmember Vogel, so I will offer her the floor for the beginning of this discussion.
Thank you. City Manager Stewart called asking me to withdraw my nominations. It's not good for our partnership with the district. The city needs to stay in our lane. Only they can nominate teachers and students. It's not our event. I should be nominating a hero. I argued that hero is subjective. She said she would be upset if the district nominated an ex-employee of the city who resigned. She then said she is not putting my nominations forward, including to the mayor for review. I said I needed space and time to consider this all. The next morning, I declined to withdraw on principle via email and requested for this as an agenda item. She then drafted an official letter recommending the withdrawal for this packet that you have all read and attached with my nomination letters as I requested, and here we are. I would like to discuss 3 things tonight. 1, should administrators have say over elected officials supporting their constituents, awarding visibility through nominations? 2nd, should we explore nomination guidelines with inclusion criteria, as there aren't any? If our nominations need approval from administrators or the district, should we really even be participating? And lastly, what do we do with my nominations? Thank you, council.
Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Clark.
I guess that I gave you all a little history on where this event all started. I think it was at the last meeting or so. And I thought a lot about it since then. This whole idea rose from an opportunity to recognize some Special Olympians who didn't get their name in the paper, who didn't get recognized in the community, didn't have the schools patting them on the back and telling them what a great job they did. This was an under-recognized group of kids that were out there competing just as hard as every mainstream kid there is in our school system and going basically unrecognized. So the idea arose there was a lot of people in the community that deserved recognition for the things that they were doing, whether it be a Special Olympian, whether it be the baseball coach, Pee-wee baseball coach that built an entire league over the course of 15 or 20 years of their life. That's what all of this was about. And in my opinion, the city council does a lot of great things throughout the course of the year or their careers. But the single most important thing we did was we started recognizing residents and students for the accomplishments and the things that they contribute to our community. I can tell you that at one point in time, after a couple of years, we had no Special Olympians recognized. And I went to Mr. Harvey at the time, he was the superintendent, and I says, how come we're not getting any nominations for Special Olympians? Well, the teacher doesn't think that they've done anything that is, I said, well, that's nonsense. They don't have to be, gold medal, winners. They need to be recognized. And that's when it started to separate. One year I found out that even though the wrestling team hadn't done very well in all their tournaments and things like that, as they had in the past, they were recognized for the highest grade point average for a wrestling team in the entire area. So I nominated them and got a call from the superintendent that says, you pick citizens, we'll pick students. And that was all kind of troubling because it shouldn't matter. To the best of my knowledge, no one that a council member has ever nominated has been refused or denied that recognition for whatever reason or whatever thing they did in the community. And it bothers me a lot that we're all saying now, this isn't our program. This is our program. If it hadn't been for the city of Mason and the administration and the members of city council at the time, none of this would have been happening. The school didn't give two rips about it. And I'm a believer that if we pulled out of this now, that it would all go away because they still wouldn't continue it. I had to goad them into joining it in the first place. So this is our program and we need to grab onto it and take it back because this is what the city council does. The school system makes sure that the honor students and the high scoring athletes and all these kids, they get all the recognition and the schools make sure that they get it, whether it be in the media, newspapers, television, scholarships, they make sure that happens. We cannot go forward and not recognize the citizens of the community for the contributions that they make and a lot of them are the contributions that they make are what make Mason what Mason is. So this is our program and we need to grab onto it and hang on to it and keep it as our own and work in a partnership if the school wants to be involved. But people get recognized all the time for various contributions, whether you agree with them or you don't. They should still be recognized for what they're doing in the community. And that's my opinion about all of it.
Any other discussion? All right,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Vogel.
I would, at first, last meeting, I didn't really mind whose event this was because I was hyper-focused on joint. And we have joint meetings all the time on council with the Planning Commission, and it's to work towards one common goal. I would hate to have limitations also put on the school district because I'm thinking about last summer, actually this time last year, when I personally reached out to John at the Dairy Hill, the Scoop, West Side, several other businesses who all happily gave me 222 coupons each so that we could put those in gift bags for the graduating class since COVID really changed their year and the close of their year. Many support the school and the athletic department that don't have students there. And this just troubles me so greatly because it should be both. And for the city to stay in our lane, no one should have a lane. We pave the streets here, you know? So thank you. I am wondering what you guys think I should be doing with these nominations moving forward.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. What was their accomplishment? We know one quit the job, they started a group, but what was the accomplishment? What have they gotten done? What change have they made? This is supposed to recognize accomplishment, and I'm not seeing it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Schaefer.
my answer to that would be, Councilmember DeRocher, is that they made a change. They are making a change. just by bringing it up, we're talking about it. So whether they accomplish anything or not, at least now it is in public discussion, as it
It's-
should be.
But it seems to me that their purpose was to undermine the already set up council that was studying diversity within the school.
But that's a personal opinion.
I could say it's one thing to project your opinion on what someone's success level is. I would say it's successful for what they have done as far as partnerships with Holt, which our whole community supported with reading the cattle program, which was reading with the Black author. They did meet last Wednesday in a successful meeting finally after over 2 months of just trying to make room at the table for a discussion. And all reports are saying how positive it was. The school administration has agreed that they do have work to do. And in fact, that they have hired the consult of a diversity coach. So
But they've done that before. They did that before.
that's question
A long time ago. Marlon's been on that committee. That's my point.
yeah,
They're-
I thought things were really well too. I really thought the diversity committee was great. It wasn't until that conversation that I emailed you all from the Not Your Parents networking, where parents were being discouraged to coming to Mason. And then it was brought to my attention that at that time, the diversity committee really wasn't being taken seriously. I did personally reach out to Mayor Pro Tem Brown and discussed what I felt were serious challenges that this committee may be wasting his time, as he had only attended 3 out of 13 meetings, and that would be in February. So having a committee as a window dressing versus having a committee that is really dedicated to moving the discussion forward are two different things. I would have to say strongly that what they have done is they have been holding us all accountable. And in a community that is 90% white, where we don't know what we don't know, accountability is so well needed. And that to me is courageous and heroic, because people are so emotional about it, thinking that they're slandering a school district. That is not how I see it at all. I hope that helps.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Clark.
I will say that I spoke to Councilmember Vogel when this first came up. She asked me for some history and I shared that with her. And I suggested to her at the time that if she was going to nominate these individuals, that she nominate them as citizens, not as teachers, not as related to the school system. And I think that had the application not referenced what they did in the school, but what they did after the school, then to me, that would have clarified things a whole lot more. But you're trying to mix the two, and that's where I think that it goes sideways.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
All right. Oh, I'm sorry, who was that?
Brown?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what the conversation here brings to light is that there does seem to be at least different interpretations about the purpose of the joint recognition ceremony and how nominations are facilitated. So I think, and this should come as no surprise, but I think that moving forward, there ought to be more of a clarified process, because you and I know, Mr. Mayor, we've talked about the role of the mayor in issuing mayoral proclamations, and how previously these were all mayoral proclamations that were coming from both the school district and the city and their respective boards. And now we've moved to a different type of citation that still carries with it the day honor and so forth. But I don't think it's at least crystal clear. I think if you ask each of us what the process is, you'd probably get 7 different answers. So I certainly think that moving forward, that we might want to consult with the school district as to what the nature of nominations are and what the process is, because it is a joint a joint ceremony, I would think that, you know, if the school district said we want to nominate somebody, that at least the mayor in issuing a proclamation would have some say in that. So I would think the same would apply for the school board president and or the school board. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mayor Whipple?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Ferris.
I don't think there's any rush on this. We will have another recognition in the fall. And then they will have more of an established track record, and I don't think there would be a problem. Could we postpone?
Is there, well, yeah, obviously that's always an option. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Clark.
I would go back to what the Mayor Pro Tem was saying, is that we're going to ask the school their permission to nominate. And no, this was our program. We started it. They fell in after us. And like I said, we've recognized all kinds of citizens and people that have done extraordinary things and things that seem like everyday things to us, but over the long period of time. So I don't think that we need to look to the school for guidance as to who we should nominate or who's nominated. The proclamations have always been mayoral proclamations, always. That's because it was a school, there was a city-driven program. They didn't have any vehicle for doing that. So that's why it was all mayoral proclamations. That gives it the weight of the council and the recognition in the city that we had hoped to get right from the very beginning. So that swings a little bit more, that mayoral proclamation swings a little bit more recognition than anything else. That's why they were mayoral proclamations.
Any other discussion?
I'm not even sure if mayoral proclamation, as in the email, City Manager Stewart recommended that that's something we could do for this. I just really felt the best place for this was during a joint recognition ceremony. Whereas it has been my understanding when we do a proclamation, it's more of maybe to kind of echo what Councilmember Josha said, like, you know, maybe after they're 3 or 5 years and working alongside with the district, that would be a proclamation situation versus my nominations should just be just that and should be going through to be part of the joint recognition ceremony. I am curious how it came to be with Clerk Jarvis working with the school, or how, Deb, how your understanding is that this is their thing and not our thing. Only in that, you know, Ron's only been here, I think, a year before you came. So there's just been a lot of changes, and you guys came around the same time.
Is there any other discussion on this? We've kind of gotten off the topic of the discussion. Is there any other discussion on the recommended withdrawal of the nominations? All right, we're going to move on. Council member reports. Anyone?
I
Mr. Mayor?
do.
Councilmember Vogel.
I was noticing with our new police hire, I just wasn't sure, what is that, us at 13? Because I thought we were at 12. And so now with the new hire in the admin report, that puts us at 7 new officers since 2018.
Mr. Mayor.
City manager.
This is not an increase in staffing. This is we didn't backfill the position during COVID, but this is the same level.
12.
Any other council member reports?
Yes,
Councilmember Ferris.
just a confirmation. Thank you, Sarah, for getting the tree planted in spite of difficulties for Arbor Day. And it's, if you want to look for it, it's actually in the cemetery. So that's about it. That's up to date.
Any other council member reports?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Clark.
Planning Commission meets next Tuesday, so I'll have a report at the next meeting. But I did want to thank the city manager. There was an idea brought forward so far as planting daffodils in the right of way, and the immediate response was, no, we can't do that because it violates ordinances. So I give kudos to the city manager for meeting with them and compromising and finding a way to make it work for at least the first year and see how well it goes, and then possibly having it go citywide. So compliments to the city manager for not holding the hard line and doing it the Mason way and finding a way to make it work.
Yep, good point. Any other council member reports?
I don't understand why my discussion was cut off when I wanted help and advisement from my colleagues and like really understanding if this is a normal process.
I don't know how to respond to that. You requested a discussion item and we had discussion, and I asked and waited a long time and nobody had any more discussion. So we've moved on from that item. We're moved on. I mean, I don't know what you're asking. The discussion was for, the item was for discussion and we had it. Any other council member reports? Okay, I have 3 items I want to bring to the council. And all of these would, I guess I'm asking for council consensus on this. If there's anyone who doesn't want to do any of these, we'll put it forward on. The one is that the issue that Mr. Ireland brought up earlier about skateboards in the cemetery, I'd like to to the cemetery board and ask that they invite Mr. Ireland to their meeting to give his pitch and have the cemetery board consider what they would recommend, if they would recommend allowing this, and if so, if there'd be conditions or anything on that. So is there any problem with that from any councilman?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Clark.
the only thing I don't think that's a bad idea, and we should certainly look at that. But we also have an ordinance that says you can't skateboard downtown on the sidewalks, and the reason for that, and part of the reason that drove the construction of the skate park, was that pedestrians and skateboards don't normally mingle too well. So we didn't want skateboards so I don't think it's a bad idea to take it to the cemetery board, but that I think was the rationale behind all that. And like I said, we built the skate park for skateboarders, and we don't allow them in this.
And I completely agree with you. I'm really going from, I guess I should have offered also that from my perspective, I'll put it on the record that the cemetery board should at least consider allowing it on the part of the cemetery that is part of the Hayhoe River Walk. That part should be open to it, at least consider it. And if they want to come up with some restrictions or rules or something along those lines, they should. I agree with you the downtown, but we don't allow bicycles downtown either, but we do allow them in the cemetery. So that's the only reason I think, but I agree with you. It's something that needs to be looked at and it needs to be evaluated, and maybe it's something that's tried for a while, and if it doesn't work, it's ended. But it's certainly, Mr. Island brings up a good point that we allow dogs and bikes to run around the cemetery, or at least go down the Riverwalk portion of it, because a portion of the cemetery is part of the Riverwalk. That it would make sense to allow the skateboarders to do it. And just thinking about the concept of people traveling without cars, in other words, on foot or in their bikes or whatnot, that part of town's kind of unique. There's no way to get from the east to the west on Columbia except when you go through the cemetery. So it might be something to consider, but I agree with you. It needs to be looked at very carefully, and And I would, from my perspective, at least, I would say they'd limit it to just the part of the Hayhoe River Walk, but I would at least want to hear the cemetery board's view of that. And I would ask that city manager, if you could make sure that Mr. Ireland, if we can figure out how to contact him. He's still on this meeting, so hopefully he is someone we can get a hold of, and he could send an email to you or Clerk Jarvis that we can invite him to that cemetery board meeting so he could make his pitch for them. Is
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Vogel?
could I would think language too at that cemetery meeting. If I remember before those no skateboards downtown sign, there are a lot of kids. So there are like a lot of rail slides and kick flips. And I think a couple of the storefront windows in the downtown area, because of the tail of the wood, broke. And then in the parks, kids were literally doing like kick flips and slides off of tombstones.
Yeah.
So maybe the language could be to just keep it on the paved way. That way we're still discouraging any destruction to our historic grave sites.
I guess the question is there any opposition from a council member to deferring or referring this to the cemetery board? Okay, I'm not hearing Councilmember Brown or Mayor Pro Tem Brown. Did you have a question?
Yeah, no opposition, just a question, and I'm not as versed in the parameters of the ordinance. I was just curious whether it also applied to roller skates or inline skating as a mode of transport as well. If we're talking about skateboards, I was just curious if those were also consideration.
I leave that to the cemetery board and Mr. Ireland making his pitch. All right, so I'm not hearing any opposition, so I would ask that be communicated to the cemetery board and their staff representative. The other issue that I'd like to bring forward to the council is, as you know, we spoke in our joint meeting with the Planning Commission that there would be a committee formed to interview the consultants, candidates, if you will, that were going to guide us through the creation of the master plan. The Planning Commission has selected a representative from that. And as I recall from our meeting, we talked about a council person being a representative on that. And I would personally like to appoint Councilmember Clark to be that representative, since he is the liaison to the Planning Commission and is a member of the council, but will respect the council's wishes if they feel that more discussion should be had or that someone else should be considered. So I guess I'm asking, is there any opposition to Councilmember Clark being the city council representative on the committee for selecting the consultant for the master plan? So silence. Member Clark I'm assuming he'll accept that. Councilmember Schaefer.
Can we postpone this a week or two?
If you're in opposition to it, we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Oh, I am.
Okay, then we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting, the selection of the council representative to the committee to select a consultant for the master plan. And my last item is I would ask for the council's at least to basically consensus in that the mayor and Councilmember Clark would come back to the council with a proposal on how to deal with this joint recognition ceremony. I am like Councilmember Clark. I was there at the beginning. I will give him due deference that he was a prime mover in getting this thing going, but I was there as well. And I think that Councilmember Clark, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's been close to 20 years. It's been a long time that maybe what we thought would work well on sort of an ad hoc, informal basis maybe needs a little more formality applied to it. And if the council member doesn't have any problems with that, I'd like to ask that we be allowed to, between the two of us, commiserate and then also possibly contact the school system how to handle how people are recognized, what the intent of the joint recognition ceremony is, and also what the criteria might be for determining if someone is to be recognized. Is there any opposition to that from a council member? Councilmember Schaefer.
If she would be interested, I'd like to see Councilmember Vogel meet with you two.
So are you in opposition to my proposal?
Yeah.
All right, we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting on how we deal with going forward and evaluating the schools. The city manager and I will probably put something together, or well, I'll put something together for the agenda on what the actual question will be. And we'll go from there. All right, that's all I have. Is there any other council member reports? That's the longest council member report I've ever given.
I have one, I
Again?
guess. It's yes, again. I learned that Wild Bill's, which was going to go in there on Kip Road next to one out because of selling pipes. And I'm curious, one, if that's true, but does our vote against marijuana dispensaries would that have an effect on what Wild Bill's Tobacco Shop could sell? So confirmation if you know if that's true. And then secondly, would our voting down a dispensary in that language related to marijuana under our vote?
City Manager Stewart, I will defer to you on this. If you know, and if you don't, we can deal with it in a future meeting, but I don't know what the ramifications are of dealing with paraphernalia regarding the marijuana laws, so.
I don't know that that's true, the rumor that you heard, but I do know that they are located in many jurisdictions that have opted out of the marijuana law. So I don't think that would restrict that business from being operational.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure like that doesn't prohibit somebody from making money and that it was strictly just about dispensary businesses in town.
Any other
Thank you.
council member reports? City Manager's report. Is there anything you'd like to add or adjust?
I do not have anything, Mr. Mayor.
Wow. That's the
Jerry.
Come up with something if you would like.
By the way, I think the daffodil idea is a heck of an idea. I planted a lot of daffodils for the club in Jackson. And it's beautiful down. Well, that's the only part of Jackson that's beautiful, but it's very nice and people really get into it. Plus the deer don't eat them.
I'm ahead of the project by a dozen already.
And there may be a daffodil display on Lawton Street next year as well. All right. Well, hearing no other business, then we will be adjourned.